Madam, for this very kind introduction. I would like to wish everybody Disability Pride Month, though the month is over. It was celebrated last month, the July, and I would like to begin my talk, my presentation. I will try to ensure that whatever I speak in English, I also try and summarize in Hindi, so that there should not be any language barrier, right? So first of all, it is important to briefly look at the two terms, gender and disability. So what is gender and what is disability before discussing their relation. So first, let me very briefly describe what is disability. Now, generally, when we talk about disability in normal parlance, the understanding is that disability means bodily impairment or intellectual ailments like schizophrenia or somebody with retardation, etc. So basically, or somebody cannot see, somebody cannot walk. So generally, by disability, what people mean in general is impairments. But in reality, there is a distinction between the disability and impairment, because impairment is in the body of a person. It may be visible, it may be invisible, it may be physical, it may be mental. But when we talk about disability, we do not talk about impairments, we talk about the interaction of impairment, of a bodily impairment of a person with the society, with the environment, and what happens due to such environment, whether the environment and the impairment creates more barriers or it eliminates barriers. So generally, by disability is meant interaction of the socio-economic political conditions with the impairment, bodily impairment, and resulting barriers from such interaction. So, for example, my interaction with society as a blind person, what would it mean in terms of disability? Why I am disabled in terms of the interaction of society and impairment? Because my impairment, when it interacts with the social environment, be it going to hotel, be it taking classes, be it attending marriages, everywhere, no attempt is made by society to ensure that my impairment, my lack of ability to see is compensated. On the other hand, every possible attempt is made to either close doors on me or to simply treat me with indifference, or simply to just stigmatize my presence by questioning my uh, my place. For example, why as a blind person you should come and watch cinema, or why as a blind person you should come and watch a cricket match, etc., etc. So basically, those who confuse impairment with disability, they have a medicalized notion of disability. So they locate disability in the body of the person. They don't pay any attention to externalities. They only pay attention to something which is internal to the body. On the other hand, when we adopt social model of disability, the social model of disability helps us to know what happens when there is a interaction between the socio-economic environment and the impairment, whether the interaction is positive or whether it is negative. Mostly the interaction is negative because the society is not designed, society is not planned in accordance with the needs of certain groups which are different from the majority, which are not as similar as the majority group, that is to say the able body. On the other hand, the third approach, the human rights approach, it further adds to the social model when we know that environment results in barriers. The interaction between the environment and the impairment, when it results in barrier, and if it is clearly known, then what effort should be made to eliminate the barriers? What should be done to ensure that the interaction does not remain negative, but it becomes positive? So that is where the notion of disability lies. If I were to briefly explain you the whole thing in Hindi, तो जब हम विकलांगता की बात करते हैं, अपंगत्व की बात करते हैं, तो जनरली हम लोग अपंगत्व को व्यक्ति के शरीर में देखते हैं। शारीरिक अक्षमता जो होती है उसको हम अपंगत्व कहते हैं, लेकिन वास्तविकता यह है कि शारीरिक अपंगत्व एक शारीरिक समस्या है, एक शारीरिक कमी है, या एक शारीरिक भिन्नता है। तो शारीरिक भिन्नता या जो शारीरिक समस्या जो है उसको अपंगत्व कहना क्या ठीक होगा? तो एक तबका जो अपंगत्व को व्यक्ति के शरीर में देखता है, जो अपंगत्व को एक कमी के अपंगत्व को एक कमी मानकर, एक शारीरिक कमी मानकर फिर चलता है, वो एक तबका है जिसको हम वैद्यकीय संकल्पना, अपंगत्व की वैद्यकीय संकल्पना कह सकते हैं। और इस वैद्यकीय संकल्पना में ये सोच ये होती है कि ओके, ये एक शारीरिक कमी है और इसको दूर करना चाहिए, इसका इलाज करना चाहिए। मतलब अपंगत्व को शारीरिक कमी देखते हुए उसको एक बीमारी के रूप में, एक कमी के रूप में, एक ऐसी परिस्थिति जिसको कि हम दूर कैसे कर सकते हैं, जिससे हम व्यक्ति को कैसे उभार सकते हैं, इस तरह से देखा जाता है। जबकि सामाजिक दृष्टिकोण से अगर आप अपंगत्व की तरफ देखेंगे तो वो जो तबका है जो सामाजिक दृष्टि से अपंगत्व को देखता है, तो वो तबका कहता है कि अपंगत्व शरीर में नहीं होता, क्योंकि शारीरिक अपंगत्व कोई शारीरिक कमी नहीं है या कोई समस्या नहीं है, एक विभिन्नता है। जिस तरह आप अंग्रेजी नहीं बोल सकते उस तरह मैं देख नहीं सकता, तो एक विभिन्नता है, एक डिफरेंस है। तो डिफरेंस को आप बीमारी समझेंगे या डिफरेंस को आप रिस्पेक्ट करेंगे, आप उसको आदर से देखेंगे कि ओके, सब लोग एक जैसे नहीं होते, हमारे हाथ की 5 उंगलियां भी एक जैसी नहीं होती, तो हम व्यक्ति साम्यता कैसे प्राप्त करेंगे? तो इसलिए फिर कहा जाता है कि जब शारीरिक भिन्नता और जो सामाजिक वातावरण है उनका जब सहयोग होता है, वो जब आपस में उनका इंटरेक्शन होता है, तो इंटरेक्शन पॉजिटिव भी हो सकता है, निगेटिव भी हो सकता है। जब इंटरेक्शन निगेटिव होता है तो क्या होता है? अपंगत्व निर्माण होता है, क्योंकि हम बाधाएं तैयार करते हैं। जैसे अगर मुझे सिनेमा देखने जाना है, लेकिन अगर सिनेमा थिएटर में टेक्नोलॉजी मुझे सपोर्ट नहीं करती, ऑडियो डिस्क्रिप्शन नहीं देती, या अगर मुझे लेक्चर देना है और कहा गया है कि आप दूसरी मंजिल पे लेक्चर दीजिए और वहां पे व्हील चेयर नहीं है, या मुझे ट्रेवल करना है लेकिन ट्रेवल में जो टॉयलेट्स है वो व्हील चेयर बाउंड नहीं है। तो इस तरह से हालांकि मेरी शारीरिक विभिन्नता से ज्यादा इसमें प्रॉब्लम क्या आ रहा है, प्रॉब्लम आ रहा है सोसाइटी के, समाज के ढांचे का, क्योंकि सामाजिक जो ढांचा है वो एक एक व्यक्ति, एक विशिष्ट समुदाय को ध्यान में रखते हुए बनाया गया है। और ये बात सिर्फ अपंगत्व के कोई लागू नहीं होती। आप अगर अब अगर डॉक्टर अंबेडकर की फिलोसॉफी ले ले, तो जो हमारी सामाजिक व्यवस्था है वो एक विशिष्ट वर्ग को ध्यान में रखते हुए उनके हितों को प्रोटेक्ट करने के लिए बनाई गई है। और इसलिए बाकी जो तबके हैं, बाकी जो समूह है समाज के, वो फिर उनको फिर उनका वो पिछड़े हुए रहते हैं, उनका उत्पीड़न होता रहता है। So the point which emerges from this discussion is that not only we need to describe disability, which we can by using social model of disability, but we should also be able to have a policy, and the policy becomes visible. Policy can be formulated when we also deploy what is known as the human rights model. तो जो मानवाधिकार का जो दृष्टिकोण है, अगर हम उसको सामाजिक दृष्टिकोण के साथ साथ अगर उसका हम उपयोग करेंगे, तो फिर जो बाधाएं समाज निर्माण करता है, उन बाधाओं को दूर कैसे किया जाए, तो उन बाधाओं को दूर करने के लिए कुछ अधिकार हमको अपंग व्यक्तियों को देने पड़ेंगे, और उन अधिकारों को देने की जो प्रक्रिया है उसको हम मानवाधिकार प्रक्रिया कह सकते हैं। So now disability, when we talk about disability, is both visible and invisible. So visible disability is just like I am totally blind, or there may be some persons who are on wheelchair, so it is a visible disability. But there are certain disabilities which are invisible disabilities. So people with learning disabilities, right, dysgraphia, dyslexia, so they, or multiple sclerosis, these people, their disability is both physical and mental, and it is invisible. It is very, very inner to the body of a person, and therefore the impairment is very much inner to the body of a person. Therefore, one cannot really see, one cannot really perceive it. One cannot really see it, one has to perceive it, right? तो इसलिए कह सकते हैं कि इनविजिबल डिसेबिलिटी जो होती है, जो डिसेबिलिटी सदृश्य नहीं होती, अदृश्य होती है, तो वो डिसेबिलिटी ज्यादा वल्नरेबल होती है, क्योंकि जो इनविजिबल डिसेबिलिटी वाले व्यक्ति होते हैं उनको समाज को कन्विंस करना बहुत मुश्किल होता है कि उनको कोई डिसेबिलिटी है। तो अगर आपने तारे जमी पे अगर फिल्म देखी हो, तो उसमें इनविजिबल डिसेबिलिटी का बहुत अच्छा चित्रीकरण किया गया है, और कैसे इनविजिबल डिसेबिलिटी का सामना करना चाहिए, किस तरह से इनविजिबल डिसेबिलिटी के प्रति हमारी संवेदना होनी चाहिए, वो उस मूवी में हम देखते हैं। कुछ ऐसी भी डिसेबिलिटीज होती है, या कुछ ऐसी भी इम्पेयरमेंट्स होती है जो जिन लोगों को वो इम्पेयरमेंट होती है वो खुद को अपंग नहीं मानते। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, if you ask certain people who are deaf, who are speech impaired, who cannot speak, तो ऐसे व्यक्ति, ऐसा ग्रुप है जो कहता है कि हम खुद को अपंग नहीं मानते, क्योंकि हमारे हिसाब से स्पीच ability सिर्फ it is not only through vocal cord or tongue, we can also speak through signing, right? So those people say that if you just confine the speech to a particular mode, then you are perpetuating hegemony about speaking, ability to speak, whereas ability to speak may manifest itself in a multiple ways. You can speak with eyes sometimes, you can speak with sign language, you can speak with other symbols. So why to why to attach special significance to merely ability to speak by word of mouth, right? So अब जो मुख बधिर व्यक्ति है उनका जो समूह है वो कुछ लोग हैं जो सोचते हैं कि वो अपंग नहीं है, क्योंकि उनके हिसाब से जो बोलने की प्रक्रिया है, तो बोलने की प्रक्रिया सिर्फ मुंह से ही हो सकती है या जबान से ही हो सकती है, गले से ही हो सकती है, ऐसा जरूरी नहीं है। आप कई बार आंखों में भी बात कर सकते हैं, इशारों में बात कर सकते हैं, बाकी मैनरिज्म्स यूज कर सकते हैं। तो वो बहुत विगरसली वो चैलेंज करते हैं कि हम अपंग नहीं है, और हम नहीं मानते कि जो प्रक्रिया, जो स्पीच की जो हेगेमनी है कि भाई वर्ड ऑफ माउथ ही स्पीच होता है, तो वो उसको चैलेंज करते हैं। नाउ व्हाट इज जेंडर? So generally, again, by gender, we should not confuse sex, because sex is again something which is attached to one's body. But nowadays, with LGBTQI plus community, I don't know whether we can even say that sex is bodily, because outside body also there are certain aspects of sex. So maybe sometimes you feel you're a man, sometimes you feel you are a woman, sometimes you feel that you're neither man or woman. So there is fair amount of complexity in one's gender identity. So therefore, sex basically has to do with just one of the several nuances of body, and to confuse therefore gender with sex is not correct. Gender, on the other hand, is a social role. What society thinks about your role, your particular identity. So your identity as a woman or your identity as a man. So my identity as a man means I should be a bread earner. I should be somebody who should go to office, make money, try and ensure that my family gets everything. On the other hand, the identity of the women traditionally is, okay, she should stay at home and ensure that she engages in rearing and bearing of children. She does not resist reproduction. She plays a necessary part in taking the generation forward, human generation forward, etc., etc. So basically, there is a role division, so sexual division of labor, as they call it, right? So men are men and women are women. But is it the reality? Reality is that sometimes a man may be womanly and a woman may be manly, or both. So this idea that we may simply capture a person as a man or as a woman, I think is no longer very popular. And in reality, we have to challenge this binary of men and women, and we have to look at the identity of a person as he or she takes it, right? तो जब हम जेंडर की बात करते हैं तो हम लिंग के ऊपर, लिंग और सेक्स, ये दो चीजों को हम मिक्स नहीं कर सकते। लिंग समाज देता है और सेक्स जो है वो हमारे शरीर में कुछ अवयव को के साथ उसका रिलेशन होता है। तो और रियलिटी है आजकल की, आप कुछ वक्त के लिए आप खुद को पुरुष मान सकते हो, कुछ वक्त के लिए आप स्त्री मान सकते हो, कई बार आप दोनों, आपको लगता है आप दोनों नहीं हैं। तो जो हमारा जो व्यक्तित्व है वो व्यक्तित्व बहुत कॉम्प्लेक्स है और उस व्यक्तित्व को हम एक बॉक्सेस की में नहीं बांट सकते कि आप पुरुष है या स्त्री है. So therefore the gender is socially constructed and gender is socially informed. It is also politically constructed and politically informed, and it is same with the case with the economics. So economics also has its assumptions about gender. Men would earn, women would just not be able to earn as much as men can, so on and so forth. Another example of economics is household work of women, which is equally important, but we never calculate the household work of women as GDP, gross domestic product. We don't calculate the value of the household work in the gross domestic income, right? GDI or GDP. Whereas in reality, we know how much money we have to pay to our maids at home, right? For cooking food or for doing other household works. So the irony is that we are
हेलो पार्टिसिपेंट्स, आपको आवाज आ रही है?
आ रही है मैडम, सर आवाज नहीं है.
नाही मॅडम.
आवाज नाही येते मॅम.
सरांचा आवाज नाही येते. प्लीज वेट करा.
सरांचा आवाज नाही येते.
वेट. फ्रेंड्स प्लीज वेट करिए. सर के आके लाइट गए हैं तो वो दूसरे डिवाइस से ज्वाइन कर रहे हैं. प्लीज वेट.
ओके. आवाज मॅडम येतोय का?
सर मी सांगितलंय थोडा वेट करा. सर दुसऱ्या डिव्हाइसने जॉईन करत आहे. वेट करा.
Hello. Am I audible, madam?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir. Yes,
Audible.
you are audible, sir.
Audible,
You can
sir.
proceed.
Okay. So there was a issue of light.
Yes, sir.
So
Yes, no issue.
I was on the issue of gross domestic income or the GDP, and how ironical it is that we are ready to at least recognize the work of the maids, as at least our work in the unorganized sector. But on the other hand, our wives or our sisters or mothers, when they work, their work has as if their work has no value, as if they are just meant to do what they do, and it has as if no value. But as there is a survey, the many surveys, and one of the surveys which I can recall clearly conveyed that if you calculate the economic value of the household work of our wives, mothers, sisters, etc., so their package will be as fat as package of a smart IT official, you know. Uh, so this whole idea of perpetuating sexual division of labor and trying to create a glass ceiling and ensure that certain categories of jobs can be performed by men and others can be only performed by women, and those jobs which are performed by women should not be done by men because then the men would be women, right? uh, so these are some of the issues, but as we know, uh, increasingly the dichotomy is challenged. The Lux advertisement, which would earlier be only done by women, but now it is also done by men. Shah Rukh Khan, if I remember, has done the advertisement. So gone are the days, therefore, that okay, A should be done by women and B should be done by men. Another interesting irony about the gender is, at home the woman would cook the food, but when it comes to five-star hotels, then you don't have any problem if the chef is a male, right? So Sanjeev Kapoor. So we never associate any women with extraordinary chefship. We always identify, okay, who is the most ideal chef? He's Sanjeev Kapoor. So whenever there is any monetary value attached, then even if it is otherwise it is a household work. But once the work becomes professional, it is taken outside the home. Then of course such a work can be done by men. So this is another patriarchal hypocrisy or patriarchal irony. Okay, what is uh, what is cooking at home is professional accomplishment at the hotel, right? So this is about the gender and disability. Now, what is the connection? Because one may feel that two concepts are totally different. Why we are trying to have a talk uh, titled gender and disability, or disability or gender? Yeah, superficially they may look different, and superficially it is also possible to say that there is no connection between the two, but in reality there is a lot of connection between the two, and they are inherently collapsed into each other. So how? तो लग सकता है हमको कि ये तो दो अलग कंसेप्ट है, तो क्यों हम इन कंसेप्ट को कनेक्ट करके टॉपिक बनाया है आज के डिस्कशन का, जेंडर एंड डिसेबिलिटी? क्या जरूरत है? ऊपर से ठीक है, सुपरफिशियली ये लग सकता है, लेकिन रियलिटी ये है कि ये दोनों संकल्पनाएं एक दूसरे में सम्मिलित है, पूरी तरह से इनहेरेंट है एक दूसरे में. सो व्हाई? The simple answer is both gender and disability are the markers of the identity. So they are the markers of our identity, our personality, my being, why I exist, and what I exist. So am I exist as a disabled, or am I exist as a disabled man, or am I exist as a disabled woman? Whether I should give primacy to my disability over my being man or woman, or whether I should give primacy to my being man and women and then talk about disability. So these are interesting issues. So पहले क्या आना चाहिए? पहले हम अपंगत्व की बात करेंगे या पहले मैं पुरुष हूँ या स्त्री हूँ या कोई और हूँ, तीसरा मेरा जेंडर कुछ और है, मैं उसकी बात करूँ, या मैं दोनों की बात करूँ, या मैं ये कहूँ कि दोनों मेरे लिए इम्पोर्टेंट है? तो therefore the first and the foremost function which is performed by the interaction of the gender and disability is that both play a very prominent role in evolving our identity and depending upon what is valued by us. For example, as a person with disability, what I value, whether I value my manliness or whether I value my disability or whether I value both my disability and manliness. So this is a very interesting issue because some people may argue that, okay, sir, disability is not at all the marker of personality because disability is not permanent, it is temporary. So the argument can be made like this: okay, you are blind, but at least theoretically we should assume that tomorrow or day after tomorrow or maybe after 10 years or maybe after 50 years, you will become sighted with the advancement in technology. So your disability is just a temporary condition. It's a condition which is not inherent to your personality because it is temporary condition. It is something which is radically other of your real personality. तो जो अदर है, जो टेम्पररी है, जो हम जिसके साथ हम रहना नहीं चाहते, जिसका हम इलाज करना चाहते हैं, तो फिर ऐसी कंडीशन को हम आइडेंटिटी का मार्कर क्यों माने? Why we should say that my disability is also one of my markers of identity? So again, this is a medical approach to disability. This is an approach which would demonize disability, dehumanize disability, which would simply stigmatize disability. लेकिन जो दूसरा अप्रोच है कि नहीं, जिस तरह से मेरा व्यक्तित्व, मैं पुरुष हूँ, स्त्री हूँ या और कुछ हूँ, उससे मेरा व्यक्तित्व फूलता है, मतलब ब्लूम होता है, डेवलप होता है, उसी तरह से मेरा जो अपंगत्व है वो भी एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट रोल प्ले करता है मेरे व्यक्तित्व के विकास में. So the another approach is that, okay, it is totally ableist to think that, okay, disability is a very temporary condition because we are confusing disability with impairment and we are expecting that, okay, one day or the other it will go away. And on the other hand, the another approach which is a humane approach, a socialist social model approach, it would regard disability as something which is as important to me as my being a man or woman or maybe a person with LGBTQI as a plus status, right? So therefore, it is not correct to say that there is no connection. So first connection I have already brought you. The second level of connection may come like, can we add disability to gender? For example, as a woman or as a SC/ST women or as a Dalit women, OBC women, I am discriminated. So what if I am SC/ST, OBC and Dalit? So the degree of discrimination would be compounded. I will be more vulnerable if I am also disabled along with my being SC/ST or OBC. So I am just adding to my vulnerability. So gender is merely used as one of the additional reason for compounding or increasing my vulnerability. But in my opinion, you don't understand, you don't realize the importance of the connection of gender and disability merely by adding one to the other. Rather, you understand the connection of disability and gender when you try to look at the connection as more in terms of interaction, more in terms of a dynamic uh, relationship, like when the two parts come together, the parts are not merely whole, they are more than the whole, right? So uh, it's not aggregate only, but more than aggregate, right? So for example, as a woman and as a disabled, what happens to me? It's not that I am woman and am disabled. As a woman and disabled, the level of my alienation increases. The level of my vulnerability increases. The possibility of my being exploited increases multifold. Because apart from the social barriers which I face as a woman, I also start facing physical barriers. I also start facing socio-economic and political barriers, which I would not have faced, Yogita, which I would not have faced had I not been disabled, and if I would only be women. For example, as a woman, I can go and watch movie. As a woman, I can go and work as a teacher. But is it possible if I am both women as well as disabled? Can I go and watch movie? Can I go and teach? Can I go and do X, Y, and Z? So clearly, the level of barriers increases with my disability. Similarly, as it was demonstrated by the Supreme Court in one of the very important cases, in Tan Jamalwali's case, where the facts were very interesting. There was a blind girl, and she was a girl belonging to the most backward class of the community. And उनके घर में बहुत गरीब तबके का घर, और उनके घर में उनके जानने वाले भी कुछ आया करते थे, और धीरे धीरे उनको पता चला कि ये लड़की ब्लाइंड है और डिपेंडेंट है। एक दिन जब घर में कोई नहीं था, तो ये व्यक्ति आया और इस व्यक्ति ने फायदा उठाकर उस लड़की के साथ जबरदस्ती की, उसके साथ बलात्कार किया। अब कोर्ट में मैटर गया तो एक आर्गुमेंट कोर्ट में ये हुआ कि ये बलात्कार तो है ही, लेकिन ये एट्रोसिटी है, क्योंकि जो व्यक्ति था जिसने बलात्कार किया था वो ऊंची जाति का था, और उसको ये मानकर चलना, मतलब कोर्ट को आर्गुमेंट ये था कि कोर्ट को मानकर चलना चाहिए कि इस व्यक्ति को अपंगत्व के बारे में तो उस लड़की के मालूम था, लेकिन उसकी नीची जाति के बारे में मालूम था, और उसको मालूम था कि वो कितनी मतलब हाउ डिपेंडेंट शी इज, हाउ वल्नरेबल शी इज, हाउ टेंडर शी इज, हाउ डिपेंडेंट शी इज। तो जब मैटर कोर्ट में गया तो योगिता, सो दातार सरांचा फोन होता, फक्त मेसेज कर की मी लेक्चर. So the point was that should the court attribute this person the knowledge that she belonged to the lower caste as well. तो जस्टिस चंद्रचूड़ ने बोला कि ये तो हम नहीं बोल सकते क्योंकि एक्ट में वैसी प्रोविजन नहीं है, लेकिन ये बात सही है कि अपंगत्व का उसने फायदा उठाया और उसके स्त्रीत्व का फायदा, तो वो स्त्री भी थी और वो अपंग भी थी। तो कोर्ट ने पनिशमेंट तो कम नहीं किया, लेकिन एट्रोसिटी का पनिशमेंट उस व्यक्ति को नहीं दिया। लेकिन सवाल ये आता है कि इस सामाजिक व्यवस्था में क्या हम इस बात को इग्नोर कर सकते हैं कि हम जब एक स्त्री के साथ न्याय कर रहे हैं तो हम उसकी जाति को, उसकी जो जाति है, उसको जाति के कारण जो वल्नरेबिलिटी आती है, तो वल्नरेबिलिटी को क्या हम इग्नोर कर सकते हैं? So court, would basically ignore the caste status, but now, of course, the law has been amended, and now Atrocity Act very clearly lays down that whenever there is a sexual abuse of a woman belonging to the lower caste, then it would be presumed that the perpetrator has knowledge of her caste, right? But here what has happened is caste, disability, and the gender has intersected, has converged, and the convergence of the caste, disability, and the sex has made the women extremely vulnerable. So, negatively speaking, uh, uh, she was pushed to the doom because of her disability, because of her caste, and because she was a woman. But otherwise also, in terms of the social mobility, if you are a woman, you are a disabled, and you belong to a particular caste, then the challenges which you have to face, they are multiple, because the challenges do not merely come because of your sex or because of your gender, but they also multiply increase because of your bodily impairment. So as a woman, I would be discouraged from taking a particular job, but maybe as a disabled woman, I will be totally prohibited from even imagining to be the part of the particular activity or particular job. So that's another connection of gender and disability. Now, one very controversial area which I want to touch, this aspect may take all of you with huge surprise. You may feel that I'm very radical, but I want to nevertheless hazard, and I want to seek your indulgence in this matter. Now, one very important aspect of everybody's life is one's sexuality. So my sexuality, after I become adult, am I not entitled to my sexual desire? As a person with disability, should I simply become asexual? Should I simply tell myself that, okay, I'm not going to get sexual pleasure because I'm not worth I'm not worthy of seeking the same. In order to seek sexual pleasure, you should be able-bodied, you should be smart, you should have a good job, this and that, right? Moreover, even when people do social work, people who have magnanimous opinion about the people with disability, they would talk about the educational rights of the people with disability. They would talk about the disabled people being treated with dignity, etc. But seldom I have heard any group, positively recognizing the sexual, the necessity to, ensure that, like able-bodied people with disabilities also have their sexual pleasure. I mean, gender and disability, when we talk about, can we simply ignore the one aspect of the social life of a person at the expense of, in comparison, just because he's not able-bodied, she's not able-bodied. So in Taiwan, a very interesting initiative has been taken. There is one NGO which is known as which is known as handheld angels. And this initiative, which is a non-commercial initiative, this initiative, and you will find it very provocative, but I must share this with you, that this initiative ensures that those people with disability who desire sexual pleasure, they get the sexual pleasure. And they get the sexual pleasure not because of the pity or mercy or sympathy, but because it is natural for every human being to have sexual pleasure. And therefore they have a website, and there is a protocol by which you can contact them, and they have volunteers, and a very detailed SOP is put in place. Now, a conventional critique of this approach would be that, okay, you are trying to exaggerate. Your assumption, people may question this particular initiative by saying that it is erroneous assumption that everybody should have sexual pleasure. Right? Sexual pleasure is a privilege, and this privilege can be enjoyed by only those who fulfill certain conditions. And they would also argue that it's not only about disabled, but even non-disabled may not have sexual pleasure. Well, that argument is a very formidable argument. Another argument, of course, which is also made is it is a very Western approach. It is a very Western perception to think about sexual pleasure in terms of intercourse, or in terms of people meeting men meeting women, or women meeting men, or so on and so forth. And they would say that, okay, there may be other ways of fulfilling sexual pleasure. So again, the gender role, my gender role as a man and women, and my role as a disabled, is perceived very differently depending upon which argument one accepts. But in my opinion, if you ask me my personal opinion, I would argue that gone are the days when talking about sex would be taboo. It would be simply blasphemous to even utter the word sex. I remember Constituent Assembly debates where some female members, raising objection to repeated reference to the word sex. Right? But now, of course, sex is not a taboo word. And therefore, I was very astonished day before yesterday when certain female members from BJP, they raised a pitch against Rahul Gandhi for his flying kiss, as if he was indulging in something which was unbecoming. So you're politicizing a natural reaction. Probably he was trying to say that, okay, I don't want to fight, but I want to be in peace with everybody. Maybe there was his way of gesturing. Maybe that gesture is not liked by all of us, but can we raise the pitch and say that, okay, he's a sexist? So therefore, it is very important, if as a person with disability, if I express my desire to seek sexual pleasure, whether I will be a sexist or whether I will be somebody who would be simply thrown from the society, saying, okay, you're expecting too much because don't you have any other things to do? Why you're talking about sex? So therefore, I think I also want to bring to your notice one very interesting initiative which has been started in India recently. This initiative is not as provocative as the handheld angels in Taiwan. But this initiative is the initiative of socialization. I always feel, as a person with disability, that I'm let down mostly, particularly in conferences, in marriage ceremony, or in other social functions. Because mostly two things happen. Either people will be overprotective of me. They will just keep on asking me, sir, you want water? You want a cup of tea? You want to eat this, that? So there is constant questioning whether I'm comfortable. So as if, a person with disability cannot remain comfortable outside his house, right? That's the assumption, and therefore it's almost like it's kind of a continuous realization that you are other, and therefore you are not comfortable, and therefore we want to make you comfortable. So this sometimes this questioning, becomes very irritating, and sometimes people can even go to depression. I am very serious when I say this, because it starts pinching you from within. Why people want to keep me comfortable, despite I have not having, despite I having not said anything, right? Either in favor or against what is happening. So this comfort level. Then another thing which also happens, opposite, people will simply not bother about your presence. And I have realized this, I have experienced this in some of the most prominent conferences where I find people sitting next to me saying hello to each other, but they will not bother to come and talk to me. Because they will ask me, you want to come with us for a glass of water or a cup of tea, but not beyond that. So the lack of socialization. Again, am I not whether my identity as a disabled, whether it completely uh, it completely downplays my identity as a human being, that question comes to my mind, and therefore I always try to ensure that I make my presence felt. I am assertive and I'm very clear in uh, what I want or what I feel. So therefore, gender and disability also coming into play, because your disability becomes the marker of your role, right? So your role will be like you will just sit, you will be frozen in an unknown place. They will simply make you sit, and then just maybe at intervals they will come and ask you, are you comfortable? Nothing beyond that. Or maybe they will simply not bother about you, right? So that is one of the issues. Then another important reason why the connection between the gender and disability matters is when I want to avail certain facilities, so health facilities. For example, I want to become a mother, I want to remain pregnant, and I am disabled as well as apart from being, staying in rural area. So my status as a rural area, women and disabled, there's an intersection. So in terms of policy making, so rural health, National Rural Health Mission or Ayushman card, should Ayushman card or NHRM, should it only take into account the financial threshold, my income limit, or should it also take note of this intersection? I am rural, I am residing in rural area, I'm woman, and I am disabled. So the intersection, of the disability and gender also becomes very, very relevant and must play a critical role over other factors in policy formation. So therefore, I believe that gender and the disability, apart from playing independent role, apart from playing role as markers of identity. They have their independent role, but they also have their generative role, the convergence role. Another interesting example I would like to give, another very one or two cases I would like to cite. One case which is decided by the Madras High Court. The issue was that she was a well-known athlete. She was a swimmer, but she was a perennially disabled person. And when the selections happened for the Para-Olympic, she was the only girl who could be selected along with the rest of the male athletes. Now, a typical patriarchal setup, the committee decided against taking her to Olympic Games because they were abroad, because they thought that she is the only woman. What happens if anything goes wrong? This, that, apprehensions. So instead of focusing on her talent, her potential to bring medals for India, what we are focusing? We are focusing on her being women and as well as she being disabled. So her womenness and her disability coming together to compound her vulnerability, her discrimination, her segregation. Right? So when this matter came before the Madras High Court used the intersectionality. Madras High Court held that intersection of gender and disability should not be overlooked. And this is a classic case where instead of looking at this intersection positively, the state is looking at it negatively and targeting the particular woman, right? And the court directed that special arrangements must be made, and she should be, if required, she must be given an escort, and she should be allowed to participate in the games. So that's a very interesting example. Another interesting example comes from a setting in an institution where, and this is very common, the Nari Niketans where women are kept. And this is one of those typical cases where a woman whose IQ is not very great, and she's sexually abused by some staff member of the Nari Niketan, as it generally mostly happens. And this also happens in the families, where family members also have a go on such women because their IQ level is being low and their perception level being very negligible. They don't realize what is happening. And these women having become pregnant, and her pregnancy being known well after the permissible limits, that is to say 24 weeks. Am I audible? Excuse me. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes.
sir.
You are
Yes,
audible.
Okay.
Very
So,
interesting, sir.
she having been made pregnant due to this sexual abuse, and because the pregnancy being detected after the permissible limit, now the matter goes to the court because the government wants to shirk its responsibility, wash its hands of what had gone wrong, and therefore government wants the abortion. And the court wants to know exactly what happened. And one NGO wants to use this case as a case to demonstrate that even women with lesser IQ may have identity. Just because they have lesser IQ, they are very
acutely they are disabled? Do they lack desire? So it's in my opinion, whether or not an MR mentally retarded woman would aspire to become a mother is a very difficult and a very vexed question. And I don't think such a question can be decided in 2 sessions by a psychiatrist. But leaving that apart, at least because of this case, one issue which became very critical, which came into public domain, was this: that can you just ignore a disabled woman and just use her body as an instrument and take permission from the court that let's allow us to abort her, right? But without going into the details and without probably ensuring that such a thing doesn't happen repeatedly, or we take measures so that the disabled women have a safe environment, right? So again, gender and disability, because you are not assigning any value to her womenness. You are merely looking at her as a helpless disabled, who is exploited, and we don't want to trouble her further, because whether she would would be able to become mother. But so what? Whether or not she would be able to become mother is one issue. But what about she having been made mother already? What about the social responsibility? So that is another interesting case. The last case which I would like to cite, another interesting example from the Supreme Court judgment. In this case, a woman whose physical age was around 30, she was sexually abused by her own father, and her mother taking cudgels against the father and wanting to vindicate the rights of her daughter, and going to the court and trying to argue that because she is a woman with a very, very lower IQ, severely mentally disabled women. So she pleaded before the court that instead of taking into account her physical age, her mental age must be taken into account, and she must be tried under POCSO, because POCSO, the act which has been enacted by Parliament, gives more protection to the children against the sexual abuse compared with adult. The procedure there is much more prone, much more sensitive. Again, here the gender and disability is clearly involved. You're not only talking about women, but you are also talking about her disability. But unfortunately, Supreme Court holding that because we don't have any legal provision to substitute the physical age with, mental age with physical age, although the attention of the court was drawn to the position of law in other jurisdiction, but an otherwise activist court, became very passive and denied this basic right to the disabled people. So therefore, while summing up, I would like to argue that gender and disability is a very interesting specter. Gender and disability, apart from allowing us to understand, allowing us to go into the issues surrounding disability, surrounding the gender role, I think we begin to think creatively. For example, when I read about the experiment in Taiwan, initially I was surprised, taken aback. I did not believe that can sexual pleasure be considered as a service? And can there be volunteers to provide such a service to people with disability free of cost? Can I really look at this beyond prostitution, so on and so forth? I was not ready because my mindset was conventional. So gradually, when I unraveled the things, started getting getting into details, I realized that okay, this is a disruption. If you want to disrupt the society, as Dr. Ambedkar said, that the Constitution is merely the top. It's a top. It's a topping, right? It's merely the tip of the iceberg. You have a very beautiful Constitution, but underneath the Constitution, what is there? We know what is happening in Manipur, right? So, therefore, I think when we engage with topics like gender and disability, when we give ourselves a break from the conventional areas of academics and try and get into such newer areas, these areas provoke us. These areas make us think about our own self and make us more creative. So as usual, I think it is my third or fourth time that I'm with the college, with the RSTM University, but as its LM, it's always a pleasure to associate with it. So I would like to thank Bhargavi Madam for giving me this opportunity to have a dialogue with you on such a interesting topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sanjay Jain, sir, for discussing the very sensitive topic of gender and disability. I request any participant, if you have any question or any feedback, kindly share. Anyone? Any question?
Sir, good
Yes,
afternoon. I am
please.
Shivashish Ghosh. The
Yeah.
point is that I do not have any question, but I have a question from this side of the management for this for the lives of people who are disabled at the same time feminine. So what can be done actually, technically, from the technical point of view, as for the needs and requirements, as you said just. Okay, you explained it very clearly. So what can be done actually? That is a big question. How we can incorporate people with disability as well as people with disability and gender differences into as like mainstream. So what mechanism we may
So we have
need
to initiate policies, for example, reasonable
So only
accommodation
policy, can only policy do it, or
No,
we need some tools, as you said that
no,
there
for
are some
policy,
examples.
when there is a
Policy is the
policy,
first thing.
you have to also have a machinery, right?
Yes.
Yeah, like this
Policy,
program of sensitization is a
yes.
very important program. Few
Right.
people may feel that it is a tick mark, right? As we often
Right.
say, okay, this is for cash. But those who do such programs, not because of cash, but because to learn, they
Like
would
right.
realize that they become
I am
different
learning.
persons.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
When I attended few interesting programs, maybe cash was one of the reasons. But after coming from those programs, I thought that I'm a different person because I have learned something new, which I would
Right.
not have learned had I not attended such programs.
Right.
So sensitization and of course policies would remain paper tiger if those who are responsible to execute policy are not conscientized, and therefore such programs,
Right.
dialogues.
So the program intends to make certain people, section of people, sensitize about their
Yes,
responsibilities so that they
yes,
can spread the idea further, and with matching technologies and tools and machineries, maybe the problem can be addressed in a better way than doing nothing.
absolutely.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Anyone else? किसी और को कुछ पूछना है, कुछ फीडबैक देना है? Okay. Sir, काही questions नाही आहेत. So I extend my thanks to Dr. Sanjay Jain, sir, on behalf of UGC HRDC Nagpur, and from all the participants. Thank you so much, sir, once again for
Thanks,
engaging in such an informative session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yogita?
So friends, are you all there? Now we are at our last part of this short-term
yes.
course on gender sensitization.
Yes, ma'am.
Informal valedictory program, we can say. So I request any 2 or 3 participants to kindly give your valuable feedback. If you wish to give, you can speak in Hindi, Marathi, English, any language. Kindly say your name and from which university you belong to, and kindly give your feedback as well as suggestions for upgrading the quality of this program. Please. Any participants, आप हिंदी मराठी इंग्लिश कोई भी लैंग्वेज में फीडबैक दे सकते हैं फॉर कंप्लीट short term training program which we have started from the Monday, and today is the last day of this program. Any participant willing to give feedback?
That will be in the next session, valedictory session, no?
So there is no as such formal valedictory program, that's why I am
Okay.
in continuation with this session only.
Okay.
Yeah. किसी
Out
को
of
कुछ
all
बोल-
the speakers,
Yeah.
out of all the presentations, all the
हाँ,
presentations I like,
एक जन बोलिए, बोस सर, उसके बाद
Except-
मैडम जी.
okay, except for one, like yesterday's Dr. Supriyo Pathro,
Patras. Yeah.
what he did engaged us in some exercises which is